Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast with me, Ben Talon, illustrator and creativity coach, founder of the Creative Condition, artist and writer. I bring 20 years of creative industry experience and a lifelong love of creativity, a fundamental pillar of human happiness, to you through ongoing personal exploration and the shared experiences of others. You'll get a nourishing mix of creative industry professionals and people far and wide using creativity in ways that can take our learning to the next level so we can maximise our unique blend. The show's been supported from day one by Illustration X, a tremendous illustration agency representing a shining global roster of illustrators and animators over at illustrationx.com. The music for the show is by Dirty Freud, who you can listen to now on all good streaming services. And for everything else, for my coaching, resources and inspiration, head to thecreativecondition.com.
Is the single point of impact, the positive impact you want on that person's life. You then take the million of visitors that go through, and everybody has to do the same. And the only rule in this game is you're never allowed to say it. You have to experience it. So how do you kind of like know, not show? How do you experience this? I think that's a really key to the work that we do.
Today I'm joined by co-founders of Wiedemann Lampe, Alex Lampe and Benji Wiedemann. Wiedemann Lampe are an international brand consultancy. They are a collective of thinkers, designers, technologists and makers united by their belief in the transformative power of brand. Through detail-driven strategy, technology and design, they create brands that are true, compelling and distinctive. Brands that make the world a more meaningful place. And today we're going to drill down into the meaning of cultureful brands. Love that. Great language, very descriptive about what they do. That's what we're going to get into. We're going to talk about thinking big. We're going to talk about growth. We're going to talk about stepping out of that origin point of design and growing exponentially, culturally, as a human and as an understanding person. As key to the work they do, we're going to talk about their strategy and everything in between. This is the Creative Condition. How are you doing, guys? Welcome to the Creative Condition podcast. My name is Ben Talon. I am your host and the founder of the Creative Condition. I'm a creativity coach, illustrator, author, and a lot of things in between. You know that by now if you're a long-term listener. Hello, welcome back. If you're new, thank you for checking in. I hope you enjoy the show. If you do, please consider subscribing, liking, rating, reviewing. Whatever you can do to support is massively helpful. And the big shiny beacon that you can do to support the show, if you feel so inclined, is tell a friend. Word of mouth is critical for podcasts, and I've been doing this thing for 10 years now, and I'm really trying to grow the show at the moment. I'm trying to grow the brand, the Creative Condition, because my goal, my cause in my life, everything I do is built around elevating creativity, helping people to be more creative, to understand the inherent need for creativity in a human life for fulfillment and happiness. It's a big cause, but it's my lane. Anyway, big thank you to the founding sponsor of the show. Been here since day one, Illustration X. You can check out their global range of illustration and animation portfolios now at illustrationx.com. These guys have so much talent on their books. Go and take a look. Find what you're after. They've got a bit of everything on there. And they do a lot of great work for our industry too. Legislation around AI and protecting our rights with the likes of the Association of Illustrators and the Society of Artists Agents. Check them out now. A quick shout out to the Ukrainian Institute, who continue to do their great work supporting the brave Ukrainian creative community at this time of war. Go back and check out the episode I did with Olya Protasova, if I'm not mistaken. That's episode 212, when we talked about the bravery of creating during a time of war and what it means to people and why they continue to value creativity. Very deep, very moving conversation, troubling at times, but incredibly uplifting, ultimately. Have a look. It's in the archive now. You can get it all as usual on Spotify and everything else. So today I'm talking to Wiedemann Lampe. I'm not going to dwell. I'm going to try and cut these intros down a little bit. I love these guys. We had a great time. We had a beer. We sat down after a day of work in their new Hoxton studio, where not too long before I'd been invited by Red Setter, fantastic PR agency who connected me with Wiedemann Lampe. And we checked out the work of Alt Eicher, a legendary designer, did the 1972 Olympic identity, and we were surrounded by the incredible work there on the walls, and it just reminded me of the need for community. You might have seen last week I shared a post about my granddad sitting in his living room and yodeling to the radio. I was talking about loneliness and about isolation, which I think a lot of us feel even when we are surrounded by a lot of people in today's world. I think that we get distanced from the things that we love with the sheer pace of life. And what Benji and Alex did with their ground floor exhibition space was just bring people together over a common passion. And essentially that's a tribe, isn't it? And the older I get, the more and more value I see in tribes, because you get less and less time as you grow to be among them. You know, it's all well and good when you're 14 going to all the Comic Cons and the comic fairs, as I used to do, and the football matches when you've got more time for leisure on your hands. But as life gets busy and we have financial pressure and everything else, I think that we step away from those pleasures and those passions, sometimes too willingly. And what their show reminded me of was the absolute need to just make the effort to do that, to kick yourself up the arse, to go and be around people who share a love of something or a certain cause. And that's very much the common ground I found with Benji and Alex. Now, I wanted to delve into their, their meaning, what the origin story of this agency, because their work and the way that they've set out their strategy on their website and their manifesto and the beautiful yellow, predominant yellow with black and white accents is very striking. And we talk about that. We talk about how they met long before forming Wiedemann Lampe, where they're headed, working with entire cities and cultural institutions like the Louvre in Abu Dhabi, and we get into all sorts of thinking around this. So I hope it's going to be of some use for you, whether you are a freelancer or in an agency. There's a lot to go at here. So thank you for listening. If you would like to work with me direct, the coaching practice is growing all the time. I did a wonderful pit stop a couple of weeks ago in London. I've got 2 booked in January, which leaves me with 2 slots available. If you want to dust off those January blues and come and talk to me for 3 to 4 hours, we will get deep, we will get personal, we will get intimate, we will leave no stone unturned. We will go through your origin story, your current position, your future desires, fears, hopes and dreams. And within all that, we go through my Anatomy of Creativity framework, which covers everything from environment to humour, to mischief, to personality, to digital relationships. We go through everything to see what's making you happy, what's not, and we create a strategy for you moving forward with my dedicated notes of recommendation, the advantage of also being a writer. Get in touch. We'll have a chat, no obligation. We'll jump on Zoom for 10 minutes. If we think it's a good fit, we can book it in. It will elevate your game. It will help you to move towards your bliss. Give me a shout, ben@bentalent.com. Also, welcome feedback from the show. But without further ado, let's get into this conversation with Alex and Benji.
So, I'm a country boy. I grew up in Devon, a place called Teignmouth, which is like a seaside town. I was kind of brought up as an only child, really, because my sister was 13 years older than me. So by the time I was 4, she kind of had left home, and I'm quite introvert. So I would play with my Lego a lot. I'd build these things. I was always into art and drawing and things like that. But back in the analog days, so I really got into like airbrushing, and then my sister met a graphic designer, and I was like, oh, this is cool. You can combine this craft with something real. And then he got me into Letraset, so I was, making these posters and stuff, and I had a drawing board in my room. So I had all the gear. I had this, the drawing board, the Letraset, doing this airbrushing and stuff like that, doing my, art and design at school. And then I found computers. And that kind of transformed my world because, I liked the drawing, but I wasn't the best artist out there. I just liked the process of it. And then suddenly finding a computer, and I realised these things sort of came together. And that's how I got into design. On the other side, as a child, I was quite different. I grew up in Teignmouth. I didn't find people like-minded. Interesting enough, Muse came from Teignmouth, so they were like in a year above me.
Yeah.
So that's the claim to fame, I guess. But I used to do motocross, and that was my thing. I used to race motocross for several years, from when I was 12 to like 19, and went to uni.
Nice.
And that was the thing that I did at the weekends, and I had a whole different kind of social life from that, and combining that with the design passion. So I'd like airbrush my motorbike and stuff like that.
I was just going to say, did any of that culture bleed into your...
Because I had these airbrushed helmets. So that's probably how I got into the airbrushing, actually, because people used to have these custom helmets, and I would like try and do my own, or airbrush the motorbike. It would come off in like a day, but it was a process.
I just find it endlessly interesting, those kind of routes. Drawing's something interesting to me, because I drew a lot as a kid, and I find that it's often people suddenly go, well, you're drawing, go and be an artist. But actually, drawing, I find, is a reflection of what your broader interests.
Yeah.
It becomes almost this divination for the things that are colourful in your world, that are energising you. So I used to get hung up on, when I didn't feel good about drawing, didn't draw, I had this guilt, I attached this guilt to it. Oh shit, I should be drawing, I'm good at it, why am I not doing that? And it's because I wasn't energised in my broader life. That was just really a manifestation of what was more meaningful.
Channeling the output.
Yeah, and I always used to have this insecurity that I wasn't a good enough drawer to be a designer. And I think I carried that all the way through, like even when I studied like my A-levels, and I was getting a lot of encouragement that you're doing the right thing. And I would always say to my tutor, like, do you think I'm good enough to be able to do this? And even when I went to uni, but I think I found other ways to compensate for it, and using the computer or just imagining things in different ways. I did a lot of 3D modelling, and I could do anything. My tutor, who was like really close to me, said, on a computer, Alex, you can do anything. As you can't necessarily draw that well, but you're able. It's about the imagination, it's about the design, it's about the thinking.
Absolutely, it's just one skill at the end of the day. Yeah. How about you, Benji? What's your background?
So I'll skip over the wooden blocks, Lego, all of that stuff, and I think pretty early I just really got into skateboarding.
Yeah,
that was my thing. So I possibly could say I have had almost every bone in my body broken or dislocated or something, but it's like pain's your teacher, and it just getting back on the board. And what I love is so much about is the community, and what you got your group of friends, and you just see the city in a different way. Architecture is read as a skate park now, and I like the simplicity of it, like just you grab your board and you're out. There's steps, there's all sorts of stuff, there's there's benches, anything you can find in the urban realm just suddenly becomes a playground. And I think the creativity was kind of very quickly diverted into that. And then there's also this element of like focus, because I was like, when I did was my Instagram is just full of like skateboard reels and stuff like that from people. The discipline and the courage and the focus, and I think it's absolutely super fascinating. So that was one strand. But one thing that's always kind of been with me for quite some time is my interest in Japanese culture. So my dad and I sat together and we got into origami. We had this one origami book, and then this square, really thin, beautifully patterned papers, and we started getting into origami. And so that was, I think, the beginning of my love for Japan. And so I got into that, and then later, I think I must have been around 11, 12, I got into bonsai trees, which is just a really crazy thing. So I'd start cultivate all these bonsai trees, and I found this picture recently at my mum's where I'm sitting on the balcony that we lived at with this tabletop, and there are all these bonsai trees on there, and just loved cultivating them. So every March you get them out, you cut back the roots by 2/3, put them back into new soil, you clip them, you trim them, you look after them. So for me there's always something really magical in the compositional side, and there's something about kind of like human design and nature, but also something kind of like quite storytelling. So the stories that each tree, how it's formed, how you cultivate its progression, stuff like that becomes really important. And that came to quite a abrupt end, because one day I kind of like cut back all my trees and was like, you do it around March, April, maybe March, and I went off to this bonsai workshop that we had in Düsseldorf where I grew up, and bought the soil, but there was a fungus in the soil, and everyone's tree died.
Oh shit.
Yeah. That was super tragic, but also maybe, I don't know, I never really quite thought about it as much, but maybe it wasn't the worst thing, because then you go into your teenage years and you want like all these trees to look after, you want to go out and skateboard more and stuff like that. However, saying that, I'm getting more and more interested to maybe, the rooftop, to maybe have a couple of bonsai trees there and go upstairs and just start kind of like, Mr. Miyagi style. I used to be Karate Kid, now I'm Mr. Miyagi.
Karate Kid.
Yeah, that's our film.
I love that. There's two themes there that jumps out to me, and one of them with the bonsai trees is that kind of delayed gratification and patience, which is an art that I feel we need to remaster in our world today. But also the skating and the reframing of environments the joy that can bring to what others might see as a banal everyday experience is pretty magic. It's something that I try to work with when I'm doing the coaching aspect of my work, encouraging people to look upon the everyday through different eyes. Of course, a key skill in creativity.
Yeah.
They're between those things. So bonsai, skating, and Alex, your motocross and things. That kind of breadth, how important is that to the work that you do today? Because looking at your projects and looking at the visual culture and the language around the brand, there's a lot of depth. There's a lot of attention to culture and to the human condition. Am I near the mark with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think we I think we thrive on that diversity and looking at things from different angles. So the skateboarding is one way of looking at the world. I'm really into street photography, which is another way of like looking at those everyday moments in reading the city in a very different humorous way. I think it's that graphic design wit. I think they're just examples, but whatever we're doing, we're always looking at things through a completely different lens. And I think actually that goes back to where we met, which was at Lewis Mobley. Coming out fresh out of college as a 21-year-old graduate, you think you know it all. My first job was doing like hair colour shampoo for Schwarzkopf for 40-plus-year-old women, and you've suddenly got yourself in that mindset and look at the world in a completely different way. Yeah. And I'd say that also, I mean, that human-centric way of thinking is central to all of our work. So my work especially, or my team, looking at kind of user experience design, service design through different lenses and personas, and working across cultures as well, of understanding the cultural context for the things that we work on. It means that we've never been bound by a style, because I think that comes out of the understanding of who we're working for, and also brings us joy every day of waking up and doing something new. Yeah. Thinking about the world in a different way.
Yeah. But just to add to what Al said, I think one of the key interests that I have about the work that we do is the creation, right? So creating something, and that, I guess that act of creation leads that transformative element. And I think that's the really beautiful thing, is like creation. Reading a city as a skateboarder, your creative eye has transformed it from a park bench to something you can rail slide down and stuff. That's the creative process of transformation. I think that's what we very much do in the work. Is you take organization and it's exactly the same organization, but now through the creative process you really transform it, because the meaning has changed, the context has changed.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you said there, Alex, is really interesting about the kind of, I don't know if it's the right word, a stylistic approach. It's just looking at the website, I was impressed with how you've managed to find this balance of soul, but a really quite clinical, clean way. The presentation. First of all, I was quite struck by the yellow. I'm interested whether there's a story in that in itself. But also just looking at your principles and the language, and it's very accessible, but it's very, I don't know what the word is, but it works. It works a treat, and it eradicates style. It's printed. As a client coming to that, it made me almost feel welcomed into a vision which is already there.
I think it's interesting, because I think when we first started and we put a website out there, we were so insecure that the way that we wrote about things was very kind of like technical and neutral. And I think as we've grown and we've become more confident, and actually our role is as communicators, and being accessible and human is so integral into the way that we think. So I'm pleased that you read that from the website, because that was very purposeful of yeah. Us two, we're very different. We've got a very different dynamic, but at the heart we're both very welcoming and warm.
And I think what we really want to kind of like get across are these two sides, that intelligence and the things I don't know if I'm tooting the trumpet here, but we strive for intelligent work, not clever work, but intelligent work. For us, there's a significant difference, but that is accessible and understandable, not over intellectualized, because one of the things that we always say, that the only the only strategy really the audience sees is in the execution. So no matter what words you use, it has to feel very, very different at that level of experience, you know. So the same thing with the way we talk about our stuff is that we've got is this intelligence that we hope we bring into every conversation. Hopefully this one as well, but there's always a total approachable, accessible, because at the end it's humans working with humans, and it's the relationships that create the work, you know. And the better the relationship between us and our partners, the more meaningful the work can be, and the more supportive you are in the process.
Yes, I think it's very wise advice, way of putting that. And what you know, again, you strike on something very important there, which is that the end result, no matter how stripped back, no matter how minimal in its final incarnation, it's the love and the exploration and the depth that I believe personally shines through in the end. The user will feel that in some way, even if it's not evident. You know, somebody once said to me, you know, you can never and should never have the luxury of looking over a client's shoulder and explaining exactly what something means. It must be felt, and that's where the groundwork comes in and comes through. And it sounds like that's something that's important to you guys.
Yeah, and we do a lot of work on that in terms of, like, you know, articulating, you know, our positioning. How does it feel? And I think it's really important that our process is, we have a way of doing things, but it's definitely not formulaic, even from a strategic sense. Every challenge that we take on is completely different in its scale, and we have different ways of pulling that together. And it's quite difficult because, you know, sometimes I'm asked, can you know, how are we going to approach this? And it's different each time. It's almost an intuition that we know how to construct something and look at it from different angles.
One thing that does unite everything is the journey of exploration up front. So the time, and I don't know if I've never worked out the ratio, but I would like to say it's closer to 70% total engagement, immersion into our partners' world. The way, you know, the interviews we do, the workshops we conduct, just the group discussions and things like that, you know, and I think that really shapes the brief. And once you understood that, then I think the specificity of how you're delivering against it comes out of that findings. And I think too often as a designer would we want to jump into the execution, and I think often we're maybe culpable of, I don't know, fetishizing modernism or something. So we approach and say, it will always be part of the solution, the answer, you know, from a stylistic point of view. But I don't know if that's the case, and that's why the real value is in the beginning part of the project. That's always the same, and depending on how that works, that defines the brief following.
And we've actually developed our own, you know, I think this is the evolution of us as an agency as well. It's like we've actually built our own platforms to get the most out of clients. So we created our own workshopping platform, which was accelerated by COVID, obviously, because we couldn't travel around the world and do workshops in person.
But it was always in discussion.
Yeah.
We just didn't have the moment to do it.
You know, suddenly you've got the impetus to actually do it, and we've actually built this platform which kind of teases out of our clients these really lateral thoughts and thinking, whether they're creatives or whether they're actually a CEO or a CFO or a COO or an academic or a professor at the top of a kind of university kind of structure. And it gets them to talk about, you know, their organisation through really kind of a creative lateral lens. And so we've got these variety of workshops. We put them together, we piece them together, and they all join up to create this really cohesive picture. So that has been invaluable to us, and I think the being able to apply that design thinking, but also that technology understanding and the strategic understanding to create this perfect kind of set of tools.
And also to add to that, because our world spans across, or our work spans across the world, and to being able to kickstart a project remotely and meaningfully that gets captured in this real-time data is absolutely transformative to the business and how we work and the way we can mobilize projects, etc. And often it's in different time zones, and people do it in their own time. Sometimes it's shared projects, like shared workshops, etc. So that's been really important for us, to being able to, from London, really work internationally without having to travel to absolutely everywhere. So we can do it in person, or we can also do it remotely, or hybrid. So this is super flexible.
It's an incredibly smart approach in terms of the beginning process, almost archaeological in a sense. You know, you're uncovering a person's drivers, their story, their motivations. And to me, that speaks to the absolute value of communication in design, which is, you know, in a world with all these immediately accessible tools, where there might be the tendency to start with a mood board or something that's overtly aesthetic from the outset. That's, I don't want to say unique, but it's a very clever approach and the way to do it, really. I think it sets you quite apart as an agency when I look at the way that you've, you know, everything, the tone, the brand voice, everything that runs throughout that. Do you think it's something that's become a little lost in certain areas of our industry, or do you think that that's just a kind of byproduct of the pace and the immediacy of technology?
And so I think, just to add to that before going into that, and I think Alice will be really good at answering that, but it's a lot of it, and I think the importance is the pattern detection. Like, once you start aggregating so many voices and saying, this is where everybody overlaps, because not everybody, because they're in the same organizations, means that they see the same vision or they've got the same understanding of what's success. But being able to kind of really detect that, to say this is where we all overlap, and starting to amplify it, and that has also the effect that you then are able to reflect back everyone's individual voices, how they've been able to shape the output. So we are more the conduit of translating what this organizational key insight is, and therefore people want to make it access because they can see their own voice in it, and that's a huge part of the success of the work that we do. But
our process is really about us hitting the ground running, but it's also about the client understanding themselves, because there's so many assumptions and there's so many silos. You know, we've worked with very small cultural organisations, which you wouldn't have thought those silos exist, but they do. They just operate in their own little departments and they don't talk to each other, all the way through to massive global organisations. In terms of the point of difference, I think it's interesting because Benji and I have been running this for, 18 years?
And a half.
And we've
not counting.
We've just always kept our heads down. Obviously, we understand what's going on in the industry. Benji more than me. You know, you can ask Benji anything, and he knows exactly who's rebranded what, when it was done, what the timeline of that was. But we've just always done what felt right for us and what had worked for us, and continually listening to our clients and the clients that come back and asking them, you know, why did you choose us? What was it that made you kind of, you know, choose us for the project? How do we build on those strengths? And we've just progressed that and nurtured that, and it's become who we are as Wiedemann Lampe. And that permeates all the way through to how we do things, how we talk about things, and the projects that come out of, you know, our consultancy.
It's a really interesting one, because you work with your clients to define yourself.
Yeah.
What's working, what's not working, what needs improving. And one really important thing is, like, when we ask clients, when we get appointment, why did we get appointment? It's not for us to kind of like get a pat on the back, but to understand what have they seen in us as a value that we may have missed. And we hear such variety of things. And what's also really important, when they say this is why we chose you, then we're saying this is what we're going to deliver for you all the way through. You know, so if that's the value they saw, this is what we really need to kind of make sure that we hit along every point of contact.
That's really clever. And it's really smart, because that's a complete removal of ego, which is essential.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's humility there to go to sort of take that approach and not arrive at the door in any kind of rigid way. You know, that this is how we do things. And in today's world, you know, things are changing all of the time at a rate that we've never seen in human history. So that's maybe even more important than ever before, to be fluid and to deep listen, not just listen, but properly listen.
Yeah. So beautiful quote that we heard from a client. They said, "You don't even show us how we've been, like how you've listened. You show us how we've been heard." And that was for me. And that was just someone saying it off the cuff. And we're like, yeah, writing that one down. And that's for the quote book. Because that was so... This is... If I had the ability to articulate that way, I would like to ask for that value in clients to see within us. You know, not only like you've been listened to, because often what I've realized, this whole engagement is a box-ticking exercise to then, okay, we've done this because maybe you can charge for it, etc. But how does it inform the next part? But that the how we've been heard, show us, demonstrate how we've been heard, is really the connection between the insights, the strategy, and then the actual visual, verbal articulation of it.
Yeah, I can't remember where I saw it, but you described the organisation as being incredibly lean. How many people are here? How many people in total?
20.
Yeah, and it was described as saying there's no bottlenecks, which I think, I'm right in saying, is important for everything that we just discussed, to keep that flexibility, that fluidity, that ability to listen. Because maybe beyond a certain number, is that become more difficult to achieve?
I think it's sorry I interrupted you, but I think it's quite a selling point that Benji and myself are very involved in those projects still.
Yeah.
You know, you get the names on the door, whether that's our Achilles heel or not. But I think we want to keep it like that because we are present. We've got an amazing team, but we don't have these layers of communication where, you know, we'll have our designers sat in the calls, they're getting the feedback directly. It's not then trickled down, and then you get these things that are lost in translation. I think all of the client-facing team, you know, the client services, they will get design. You know, they're contributing to the strategy and the design and the art direction as much as anyone else. So within the team, you've got that fluidity and that integrity.
And what I really value about that is also what I guess clients really value, and also what is somewhere an edge to us. So the scale of the projects can be quite sizable, where we've got 30 to 50,000 employees in these organizations, so they're quite sprawling, quite big and stuff. So you go head to head, toe to toe with larger agency networks normally, and what we are able to do is just whenever we present the work that we've done, the people who've done the work are actually in the room, and often that might not be the case. So being founder-led, and it's really important for us just to have that really, like, if you choose to work with us, you choose to work with us and the amazing team. So this is like not to kind of like drive us as individuals, but it's an absolute magnificent team. But there is a reassurance and that's when we kind of like, because we rebranded a while ago, that we said, no, we need to put our names in the door, that everything that goes out has to really be, you know, signed off by us and have contact to us and stuff. So maybe we'll regret that one day, but we want to just keep that's why we there's a cap in the scale that we want to get to, because that's, I think, the right size for us. And we've also grown recently, more like from 15 to 20, so we're getting used to that structurally at the moment.
How often do you have that kind of conversation, as in course correction and sort of checking in with where you are? Because I know that the pace of life today for all of us is incredibly busy. Do you do that? Do you check in with each other and kind of consciously, or are you just on some subconscious level?
Every 10 years.
Every 10 years, I was about to say exactly the same thing.
Every 10 years. And we did so. Just to give you a bit of background, maybe it's interesting. So Al and I were noodling around in lots of, like, you know, the culture world and doing exhibitions here and stuff like that. And we did wonderful projects for Natural History Museum, Science Museum, all the museums here in London, etc. And it was always under a different name. We were called A+B Studio, which was kind of when we founded just at the beginning. We was like, oh, it's Alex plus Benji, and it's this plus that. It's this brand in digital, you know. So that was where we went to, and all of a sudden we kind of had this company that we were working so hard for tiny projects and stuff, and then we said we need to now change gear, and so we got a external strategist in, so who looked at our business strategy, and we went through this 1.5 year process. He was like, Oscar, we'll do it like in 5 months. I was like, yeah. Well, as soon as we went into this branding and positioning piece, we're like, where do you go? To create a distinct positioning for yourself, it's the hardest thing to do, because it's so difficult. And I was specifically struggling with it, because I had kind of like, I don't know, I was going through some, I don't know, Al, would you say rough patch, but just a bit just knackered and working so hard and tiny projects, budgets, etc. So how do you change the script on that? And so we went through this process, and I found it very difficult to write about who we are, because I was like, because we're something else. And then our external strategist, he said, why don't we write about the company we want to be, and we're going to call it something. We also call it Lampe Wiedemann or Wiedemann Lampe. And well, okay, now this is a different thing we're talking. That was like the project, you know. That felt so much easier to talk about who you want to be, not trying to articulate who you are.
Yeah.
And so in the last moment we said, you know what, actually, let's start with Wiedemann Lampe. And with that came a whole new kind of strategy, how we build, what we take on, what we don't take on. So where do we want to win, where we don't want to win. And that really was that 10-year line. So that happened. We started work 2015. It launched 2016. 16, yeah. It was right the end of 16, so it was 1st of December 2016. We relaunched as Wiedemann Lampe. And that's been such a game changer. Like, where the mind goes, the body follows, right? We positioned the business somewhere else, and it works. And then, weirdly enough, that's what we do for all our clients. You know, once you do it for yourself, you're like, okay, there is real tangible results in this.
Yeah.
And now we're not in a rebrand, but we're now like grown. In the projects have grown, and the complexity of the business, so we're right now in the process. The same guy who's now a financial director, so he's kind of like baked into the business a bit more, now going through the same journey again.
We're both designers. We didn't study business. We didn't study. It's not like one of us was an account director and the other one was the creative. We're both designers, and so we've navigated this ship so far and grown to the scale we are. But now we need to have that external input as well, and understand how we grow a business of this size. Not in terms of scale, but in terms of efficiencies and optimizing what we're doing, and ensure that we can deliver that over time.
That externalization angle is really is interesting. I have an exercise that I work on my coaching clients, and it's very simple, but I found it really effective. I did it on myself, going through a kind of a period of trying to be too many things and not quite knowing which way to go. So I sat down and essentially took out an A3 sheet and pencil sketched out my kind of almost utopian vision. Remove all financial constraints. You get up tomorrow and the world is your oyster. What do you do? And it's kind of, and what emerged from it was this kind of almost industrial building, which I think kind of goes back to art college, and that just that space and that hive of activity. I then sort of work backwards, and it's kind of like, okay, well, short of coming into some unexpected billions, I'm not getting that space. So what my thing was, I want to bring underprivileged kids in there. I want workshops. I want it to be this thing. But then there's this little library that I started sketching. It's very much an unconscious process on the top floor, because I also need my solitude and I like the study and the learning. Ultimately, what was coming from it was themes. So then it's working backwards. I suddenly realised that, hang on a minute, I'm spending 5 days a week sat in my little garden studio on my own. I'm missing connection. It doesn't need to be billions. I can create an educational model through the creative condition to do this, to be here, to get days out in London, to go and to do a workshop here and there. So you're right, that externalising what you want the thing to be kind of removes the real world constraints and the immediacy of the bullshit that we have here and now. And it doesn't mean you can have that, but it just means that you can pull threads from it and start to work towards something grander.
So one of the key starting points for us is sitting down with our partners and saying, okay, what does success look like? So defining success is something that is very different from an organizational to a team to an individual structure and stuff. Just to have that moment, and I think that's the real value that we bring as work to our clients and partners is creating that space to just zoom out, look at the future, and then what we refer to as like working future back rather than present forward, and that always helps. And then we often come and define that and say, okay, moving now 5 years into the future, what's worked? But then you can also start flipping that and say, well, what hasn't worked? And once you start to describe the things that haven't worked, then you're really clear on, okay, this is where we need to watch out. This is kind of like, where we need to really work on and stuff.
Yeah, and taking that further, we sometimes kind of take people out of their comfort zone to say, like, imagine, you're kind of art institution or organisation. You're not an art organisation. You're actually an aeroplane. where do you fly to? There's different exercises where you can kind of take people out of the everyday and imagine that space in a more lateral way, and then comparing, other people within that same lens. So it goes back to your original question around how do you frame things with this different lens and this different outlook. You can also apply that to your clients and who you're working with to further abstract that.
Yeah,
and I think that's crucial to get that external perspective, because when you're in the weeds, it's difficult. And this person who came in was almost like a marriage counsellor to us. Not that we had issues, but we just didn't talk because we're both in the weeds, and you're both doing the work, and you've got those pressures, and you don't have that time to zoom out and be able to talk constructively without all of the hang-ups of what's going on. So just having that time and that space to go somewhere else, talk to somebody external, and say, imagine, what if?
Yeah.
It's such a liberating experience.
Yeah. And before I forget, what was the story about the yellow?
Right. So, in a previous brand that we had before we relaunched it last year, So I've got a stupidly long name with Wiedemann, so we wanted to find a typeface that's quite condensed. It comes from real practicality, right? So we had a condensed typeface, and that was tungsten. And then you've got lamp, which is the second word, which is a bit shorter, so we centered it, so it splits the difference, right? So that's why it was. And we thought, well, actually, tungsten is the right typeface to use when you've got
a light bulb
a
involved.
director, called lamp. And so the whole idea about the illumination, and the really interesting thing is like on the periodic table, tungsten is called Wolfram, so it's the W. So I thought, well, that links up. And then we thought, so in terms of color palette, there's the on, the off, so white, black, and then the imagined spark that is the yellow. So that brand ran for, I think, 9 years.
Uh-huh.
Was it 9 years? Oh, what is it? Like 2016 to... Yeah, something like that. And before or maybe 8 years, before we changed it last year. And what we moved forward was the yellow.
And there was another story, because we had these shelves behind us, Dougie's shelves they're called, these hardware industrial shelves. And then we were both, I think it was, we were both working from home, or it was a weekend or something. We had to choose a colour. And we had to choose a colour from the RAL book, which has got, I don't know how many colours is in there, like
500.
Hundreds, right? And Benji was like, I've chosen a colour, because he always does this, he never shows me what he's done. I've chosen a colour, you take the thing, what colour do you think we should be? And I went through and I was like, looked at all these colours, and I was like, I think it's that one. We both chose exactly the same yellow.
Exactly the same
Really?
yellow one. Not discussed. And we're like, yeah, man, we're rolling with this. This is cool. Yeah, and it's such an optimistic colour. I love it, man. I love it. It's bright.
I'm regularly drawn back to it in my own projects, and there's just, I don't know, yellow and black. There's a combination of yellow, black, and white.
Yeah, because yellow and black, with more black, it feels a bit hazardous.
Yeah.
So the white and the yellow are really driving it, and then you've got the accent points coming through the black. Yeah.
In terms of scale, so I know you've done the work with like the Louvre in Abu Dhabi and projects like that. Going from the discussion around uncovering people's values in those early conversations, what does that look like in terms of scaling up for such a grand project that's going to be visited by that many people? What are the kind of the changes that happen there and the challenges?
Huge challenges, but I think it's the same methodology, it's the same approach. and it's all around that stakeholder engagement and how we take people on the journey. And it's just fascinating, you know, how you can do it in terms of, you know, we've got various workshops that we do and things like that, and they don't directly say, well, what's our values, you know, they're more intangible than that. It's about unleashing stories. We've got these amazing workshops driven by imagery and words and the selections, what people put together, and from that you start to get these themes emerging. And it's really important that we do that internally. So take the Louvre, for example. We worked with the curatorial team, we worked with the visitor experience team, we worked with the education team, the publishing team. We worked with the security staff, because they are the front line of the brand. When you go and arrive at that museum, the first people you see are the security staff, because you have to go through a kind of an airport-like security turnstile in order to scan your bags and things like that. So they are the interface. That's the first brand interaction. And by talking to all of these people, and then you know, there's audience research as well to understand what people value. The Louvre in Abu Dhabi was fascinating, because it's not just about the Louvre, you know, activating in a different region. It's about encouraging a museum going audience, because it's about nurturing that culture, because that has not existed. It's been a nomadic lifestyle. They don't curate objects. It's all about oral storytelling. So how do you make that transition? And so that was fascinating from that perspective. But in terms of process and scaling that up into much larger organisations, it's against about that data gathering, getting all these insights. But they're very soft, ethereal insights. You know, they're quite nebulous, and I think then it's that pattern matching of understanding what are the themes that are arriving here, and then you can start to create a set of actionable words and ideas that then inform everything that you do. But I think it's really important that you engage everybody from across the organisation, because it's so important to capture that variety of voices.
Because everybody, and I think that's the greatest piece of work that we have to do, is it's in a way educating that a brand has got as much to do with the logo as the way you show up at the turnstiles, at the security gates. You know, it's all of that stuff. So to understand, it's not okay, when are we seeing a logo, when are we seeing color palette? No, it's actually in behavior, and I think that's the greatest learning, and I think progression that we've had in the business is actually shaping organizational culture and internal processes, and how can you kind of bring up a very specific value of the business throughout giving people a decision-making framework from which they can come and just do day-to-day decisions, and how do you come and bring that very specific need or that insight to the foreground. And I think one of the key things that we need to really focus on, because it's quite sprawling, as Al said, nebulous and stuff, to find a question that really unites the organization and moves it away from looking at the department and their delivery into actually what matters. And with the Louvre, it was so clear that the real question we're answering is, what's the difference between entering and exiting the museum? How have we now brought value to that person leaving, and how have we enhanced it? What have we wanted to change? What are the questions they may have, and what do we want them to take away? What's this one positive impact that we want them to have? And once you get a whole organization united on what this singularity is, the single point of impact, the positive impact you want on that person's life, you then take the million of visitors that go through, and everybody has to do the same. And the only rule in this game is you're never allowed to say it. You have to experience it. So how do you kind of know, not show? How do you experience this? You know, and I think that's really key to the work that we do.
And that underpins that line that you'll see on the website, cultural impact at scale, because that applies. It's not just culture as in working with cultural organisations. It's that cultural internal change. So we're working with huge kind of enterprises, nothing to do with culture, but we're bringing that cultural understanding, everything that we've learned from working with those organisations. It's about the change that you make internally that can have this incremental difference, that once you then factor that up and scale it across all of their audiences, is a huge monumental change. And that is actually changing again, answering that central question of what is the impact that we want to have as an organisation, and being able to align through a set of values and a set of behaviours and the way people make decisions in a business and what they do and what they don't do. Ultimately, that strategy, what you don't do, that has a huge impact at scale for the organisation and society.
To add to Al, what we're saying about the comic, that's internal, and what external is what we tend to do is deduct every monetary transaction out of the discussion. We're saying, well, what's your cultural footprint that you want to have? And the discussion changes dramatically once you take any monetary transaction. If you say, what does success look like? We want to sell more X, Y, and Z. And if you say, well, yeah, that's going to happen anyway. It's about clarity around where you want to live, where you want to win, and then the consistency of kind of getting you there. And I think that's this impact at scale, is that internally, as Al said, and then externally, once you start to remove the monetary transaction, it becomes a very interesting conversation.
Something I want to ask around all this, because I'm very impressed with this, the sheer depth and the detail and the level of understanding. How do you remain excited and culturally connected to, as individuals, but also as an agency? Because with the scale of the projects you're working on and the 20 people in an organisation, it would be very easy to just become completely wrapped up in work and that process. You have to, am I right in saying you have to remain excited about the world at large and optimistic and engaged? And how do you do that? Because I always find that interesting in people. So many people leave that behind and forget the key importance of it.
Two things, I think: curiosity, and the other one's integrity. I think they are the key drivers for us, curious about stuff. And often you get a project, you're like, oh, I don't know. And then you start work on it, you're like, oh my God, I had no understanding of their world and the complexity and the things. That's a real gift, being able to see the world through our partners' lives and through their challenges, and looking at the world through that, I think is super amazing. And just being, it's just having that curious nature. And I don't know if they're the most lamest words I could have chosen, like curious and the integrity. But I think the curiosity keeps you going. The excitableness, that the excitement comes through the curiosity. Curiosity is the first sniff, and then the other one is the integrity that Al and I think. The core to the business is about integrity to each other, to everybody on the team, and most importantly, to the clients, that we want them to succeed. And that's why we've got a little bit of a, that's why we're not too fussed about awards, because winning creative awards doesn't mean that you've solved the best possible output for your clients, right? And I think our prime is that this works and it delivers for our clients and partners, and I think that's where that integrity, and we will not rest and we will not stop until this is bang on. And I think that's where a lot of our the partnerships that we've grown over many years, and that take us into new projects, into new organizations, the word of mouth that we have, etc. So that's down to the integrity. Al.
Yeah, and I think the thing that keeps us going is constantly stepping out of that comfort zone and doing things that we've never done. We had this ambition. So part of that, 10 years ago, we're like, okay, what are we doing here? We're doing all these cultural organisations. We're doing things over here. Like, what can this resolve to? What is this compound to? And it's like, well, actually, destination and placemaking, that's an area that we think we could thrive in. And then the ambition there was like, our ambition was to then design for a city. That was always that big long-term goal. Right now we're doing 3 cities. It's incredible, and with that comes these huge demands. When you talked about that scale, we're doing stuff like solving what does that brand architecture model look like for a city, and how you're going to manage and govern it for from now until 50 years time or 30 years when it's built. And that comes with a whole new set of challenges and complexities that we thrive on. It's like, how are we going to solve this? We can't just take stuff that's happened before. And so again we build our own methodologies, and we create our own tools in order to solve that, and that's the stuff that really excites us. And then our clients are like, what? So, you know, we presented this thing, like, what? So you've actually built a model around this? And I was like, yeah. I was like, I thought you were just going to present an idea or a storyboard. It's like, no. It's like, we're into it. If we want to do something, we get stuck in and we do it and we deliver it. It's not even in the brief, you know, but we still got that passion today. It's the same passion that we had, you know, 18 years ago when we set up, but we're just solving different problems with it. And that's the stuff that keeps us going. And aside from that, you know, we're always going to, you know, seeing what other people are doing, going to kind of webinars, going to talks, picking up stuff that's going on. You know, we're really engaged in that as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the best bits of advice I've ever heard was to read wide, read well, you know, in terms of the creative process, and just feeding the mind. You have to cross-pollinate and be enriched in that regard, don't you? And I think that, you know, if it becomes replication otherwise.
Yeah, we're not interested in that. We're not interested in rolling something out that we've done before. Mm-hmm. You know,
that was also one of the things why we were reluctant to have a website, because I think it's the ghost of projects past, right? It's the things that you're like, oh, you did that, can you define that for us? Yeah. And I think what I thought was really liberating for the 7 years where we didn't have a website is that you could redefine yourself with any conversation you had, however you positioned your business, you know. But now it's good we have one, because there's a bit of like track records and a bit of like, you know, what have you been up to? Well, you can actually see it.
I was looking today on the train, and I've been there countless times, but it was only today on the train that I found the work.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, I don't want to say it's buried. It's not buried, but it's the values and the language and everything else communicates first before you have to sort of look for the work. And I was impressed with that, and I think that speaks to what you're saying. It's almost you get everything else first. You get a flavour, you get the culture of Wiedemann Lampe, and that to me is mature but effective too. I think
that was actually a learning from another client we're working with. That, you know, architects traditionally you lead with what's called the beauty parade. It's like, yeah, there's the work that you've done, but actually leading with a message and leading with something that is quite distinctive is a brave move, but it's also kind of something that we strongly felt.
But you see, that's about positioning. So having a very clear positioning. So there's really like two parts. Well, there's a you know, the cultural impact at scale, and then this term we coined, which is cultureful brands, which I think we don't talk. Well, we can talk a lot more about, but when we realized, so if everybody, like, there's this word chess going on, everybody uses the same kind of language, and we're like, well, the language that we wanted to use around culture actually didn't exist. So we thought, well, what we do is cultureful. It's the multiplicity of culture, etc. So that for us became such a strong positioning, and we're like, well, this is our positioning in the market. If you've got a split second of someone's interest, or it's about what do we want them to take away, it's that if they work with us, it's this cultural impact at scale. And as Al said, like, we're working on 3 cities, and everything that we do is always got a sizable component about it. Not that the organization has to be big, but the impact that we want to create is really scalable. That's really important. And then all the work is a justification, or just identifies this, or just demonstrates how
it's like a proof point.
It's a proof point how we've addressed that. So that's a very clear how the structure of the website works. And I think often maybe people lead with the work because the answer is in the work. Mm-hmm. But maybe the standpoint isn't clear from the business, you know. So you're selling graphic design with us. Graphic design is a middle as a German. Is the means to deliver.
Yes.
You know, at scale, amplified. Yeah.
It's the medium, but the meaning. But the meaning is the driver. And the New York State Parks again. I loved that so many facets were pulled into this 3-stage methodology. I thought it was beautiful, but what I was really impressed with that was the fact that it then became almost a manifesto for the way that people behaved and operated in the business.
Mm-hmm. And that's I mean, I think that's a classic example of like one of our projects that comes in as a wayfinding brief. or they've got a very particular problem with that. And for us, it's like just really going deep with that and understanding, like from an organisation practice, it's not about the signs. It's about how they communicate their offer to their audiences. It's about the multitude of ways that audiences engage with them, and it's vast. I think we captured like 22 different users or use cases for coming to the park, and it's like, how can we bring that in a really succinct framework that works as an organisational mechanism, but it actually allows them to really communicate with integrity what they do and clarity. And I think projects that come in really start to exercise who we are as an organisation in terms of that brand thinking, in terms of that experience design, in terms of that kind of human-centric design and problem solving, but also that visual execution as well, the illustrations, the maps, the actual physical signage, how that all comes together from an engineering perspective. It's really, it's a lovely project.
But interesting, it's one of the first ones, I think, where we went from the outside in. Normally we work from the organizational kind of like, strategy, purpose, etc. But this time we're like, well, we're looking at the organizational strategy through the lens of the experience. So everything that's inside the bounding walls, the fence is the experience, everything outside isn't. So it really started at that point. So we were able to start really refining the organizational pillars through the lens of the experience. Because normally we start at a different place, That was interesting.
Well, I mean, this has been a wonderful insight. I don't have a great deal left to ask. I think we've covered a lot of ground here. I guess as a wrap-up question, we talked about the sort of 10-year check-ins. Like what's exciting you moving forward? I mean, 3 cities is probably enough on your plate, but what's got you giddy right now?
Right, I think this is a really interesting one, and I think the business kind of like existed in 3 iterations. So I think we're moving now into the 3rd iteration. So in 2, so there was the A+B, which was more kind of like a graphic design studio with digital integration, etc. So that then moved into Wiedemann Lampe, which is really a strategic brand consultancy. And I think the things that really excite us, not only coming to deepen all of the things that we do, but one of the things we always say, that the heart of good brand strategy is good business strategy, but at the heart of good business strategy is good brand strategy, right? So closing that loop, and the more we start to work really deep in the machine room of organizations, the more you're realizing that brand is driving the business ambition, and there needs to be also a very clear connection between the way the brand shows up outside and the business commitments it makes. So what we are able to do is kind of like now start looking more into the business strategy through the lens of brand and delivering in the brand strategy against the business strategy. So closing that circle, and that started really with the project when we got a colleague on board, and he is called Axel Rundweber, and he is our director of regenerative economics. So what we tend to do is there's a point in discussions we have with clients and saying, if you want this position, this is how your business has to commit to it, or you can push it, or you can push it further. And that comes always with suggestions how they can build more regenerative business practices into their business. So that's a new thing that's being integrated more and more into the business, and I think that's where it moves towards. Not that I'm saying that we're moving more to a business or management consultancy, but we're always going to be a brand consultancy. But there is this extra bit of this extra layer that we're bringing in.
I'd like to frame it in a different way. Not in a different way, but just to support that. And you said about the importance of the stuff that you read, right? And I'd frame it in those 3 chapters. I think when we first set up, we were reading Design Week and Creative Review. In the middle chapter, we were reading Fast Company, Wired magazine, that kind of thing. And I think right now we're subscribed to Harvard Business Review, looking at McKinsey reports, and just really interested in the role of design thinking within businesses, and it's using that same tool set but actually solving different challenges but at the end of it, you get this amazing human-centered communication, which talks to all of those audiences, has that cultural impact at scale, but still has that kind of visual design. We talk about design is almost the last thing that we do in terms of the execution, but I think that subject matter interest has changed and evolved as we've moved on.
And I think, to round this up, so whilst management consultancy have kind of like moved further into design, we've gone exactly the opposite. We've gone from design further and further into the management consultancy side.
Yeah, which makes absolute sense. Like you said, it's that design as an end result is nourished by all of that, the management consultancy and the relationship along the way.
And sometimes I'm not belittling, what those guys do, but sometimes we'll get a project, especially if it's one of these big city scale developments, and you'll get this business strategy deck that lands that has been developed by a consultancy. They're like 200 or 300 pages long, and they're like, we don't know what to do with this, and our role is translating and understanding that business strategy and translating it into a brand strategy, and that's something that is a skill in itself, and something that we enjoy doing and honing, but really understanding the business case, especially as well because our audiences have changed as well. If I go to our audiences, our partners who we work with, we would always work with a brand manager or the marketing department. We're now working on the C-suite. So what you're presenting to a CFO or a COO or CEO needs to have those proof points of say, okay, what impact is this design decision going to have? Can we defend it in terms of that business strategy? Is it going to deliver what we need in terms of shareholder value? That's a very different conversation and a very different set of language, and something that we've had to learn as well of not being cognizant of the fact that the words that we use to describe what we're talking about today can be a bit jargony, and you need to dismantle that and be able to talk in ways that resonate with the business leader.
Well, this has been an absolute pleasure and an eye-opener for me, and a very enriching experience, so thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Man, absolute pleasure to have you. Such a legend. Thank you so much, Ben.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Alex and Benji from Wiedemann Lampe for taking the time to have a wonderful conversation. There's so many insights into thinking big but thinking right as an agency, and working with those global clients, getting to the core of people's needs, desires, their purpose, their values. I think it's integral stuff to good branding in this age when too many people have the tools but don't have the nous. You can learn a lot from Benji and Alex, so check them out. Wonderful agency, wiedemannlampe.com. All the info up there. I encourage you to do so because it's a wonderful example of what a website can do and how a brand can speak through very little, very effectively. I love what these guys do. So keep in touch with them. Keep in touch with me if you want to give any feedback on the show, ben@bentalon.com. I should apologise for a little bit of noise interference on that one. We did it with an open window on a warm day in central London. So we had ambulances, we had police cars, we had the lot. But it throws back to some of the earlier episodes on the show where I like to just let the context of the actual conversation be and not polish everything. I hope that's all right for you. What's going on? So more coaching opportunities are available. If you do want to work with me directly, I am doing more and more now as I move forward. I love doing this. I have got a book offer coming up, and what I'm working on your book, essentially. If you're a founder, if you're somebody who wants that book, but you're not entirely sure where to start, but you've got a story to tell, I'll get that story out of you with the skills that I use on this podcast, and then bring my coaching into play to work with you to get you to see the best version of your narrative. And then we write it. It could be your learnings, it could be your story, it could be your reflections. But if you've got something valuable to give back to the industry, I'm loving working on these projects. I started with Hector Ayuso, founder of the new festival, Paradiso in Mexico, but also of Off Festival. Hector was the originator of that. Founded it back in 2000 and ran it for 24 years. Wonderful man. Rich story. We got to tell it through his story, the reason you're doing it. I wrote it as a 6,000 word prose style short story to capture the intensity. I'm currently working with another guy that I'm not at liberty to say, but this is more of a short essays and reflections, and it's been more of a book coaching / ghostwriting exercise. But I love the process.
I love spending those hours hearing a story. So if you've got something to give back to the industry and that's where you are, get in touch. There's also the Pit Stop, the one-to-one flagship session. I'm developing a group storytelling exercise at the moment. So let's keep in touch about the coaching if that's for you. If not, head to thecreativecondition.com anyway. There's a reading list there. There's 300 plus episodes archive of this podcast with all that information. It's all there for you for free because this is my cause, elevating creativity. That's enough from me, guys. Big thank you to the founding sponsor of the show, illustrationx.com. Check out their global range of illustration and animation portfolios now. Big shout out to the Ukrainian Institute doing important work for a brave creative community in Ukraine at a horrible time of war. And once again, thank you to Wiedemann Lampe and to Red Setter PR for setting that one up. So keep in touch with what these guys are doing. Keep in touch with me. Take care. Have a great week. Stay creative.